if the story of death in African traditions isn't what you expect? What if I told you that Africa, like many other ancient cultures, has its own powerful goddess of death and rebirth, but her story has been almost completely forgotten by the world? While many cultures have their own underworld deities, Hades in Greek mythology, Hell in Norse beliefs, and Ereshkigal in Mesopotamian stories, there is a side to African spiritual traditions that remains largely untold. How is it that in the world's most ancient and diverse cultures, the stories of powerful African goddesses of the underworld remain relatively unknown to the global audience? We all know of death as a formidable force in the myths and legends of every culture. The rulers of the underworld, or divine figures who govern the passage between life and death, are often both feared and revered. From the great Hades to the brooding Hell, and even Ereshkigal's reign over Mesopotamia's afterlife, these goddesses and gods leave their mark on the way we think about death. But what if the African continent has its own deeply spiritual stories of death that reveal something new about how we view life and afterlife? What if the African goddess of death isn't just a dark figure, but a force of transformation, renewal, and even love? In this video, we will uncover a figure that represents not just death, but rebirthed underworld goddess from Africa, whose name has largely been overshadowed by the more widely known myths of the West. Her name is Mami Wata, a goddess whose story spans the African continent and beyond. Mami Wata is often associated with water, healing, and fertility, but behind her gentle and nurturing nature lies a powerful force of transformation and spiritual guidance. While many see her as a goddess of life, she also has a connection to death, and that is where the true mystery lies. But there's more to explore than just Mami Wata. Enter Egbesu, Mami Wata's darker twin. Egbesu is a goddess of revenge, destruction, and cosmic justice, with an intimate link to the underworld. She governs the transformative powers of death, and her role is not just to take life, but to restore balance when chaos overwhelms the world. In many ways, Egbesu's reign over the underworld is that of a powerful force, ensuring that the cycle of life and death remains in equilibrium. This is not a goddess who only symbolizes an end. She embodies transformation, renewal, and the equilibrium that exists between life and death. As we journey deeper into this world, we'll also explore underworld figures from other African belief systems, figures often hidden in plain sight, yet deeply influential in the spiritual realm. We'll examine deities from Congo and Yoruba cosmologies, whose roles in death, justice, and spiritual balance have shaped the way these cultures understand life's most fundamental transition. While many African traditions are known for their connection to ancestral spirits and the guidance they offer, the role of these goddesses in shaping the death and rebirth process is far more complex and deeply embedded in the African worldview. But why has the world largely forgotten these figures? Why are the African goddesses of the underworld not as prominent as their counterparts in other parts of the world? The answer lies in history, Western rules, and the often erased African spiritual traditions. Yet their importance cannot be overstated. These forgotten deities offer a profound understanding of life, death, and the intricate spiritual practices that guide African people through the cycle of existence. So, who is Africa's goddess of death, and what lessons can we learn from her? Why is this powerful goddess's story so often overlooked? And how does it connect to the cycles of life, death, and rebirth in African spirituality? Join me as we uncover the hidden truths of African underworld deities and rediscover the forgotten goddesses who have influenced African spiritual practices for centuries. Through their stories, we will uncover a rich tapestry of wisdom, transformation, and the powerful role of death in the cycle of life. Mami Wata is perhaps one of the most well-known African deities, particularly in West and Central Africa. She is often seen as a water goddess. Her name literally translates to Mother Water and is linked to both the ocean and freshwater. However, Mami Wata is much more than just a water spirit. While many view her as a figure of healing, fertility, and beauty, she also has a deeper, darker connection to the underworld and the spiritual realm of death. Mami Wata is commonly depicted as a beautiful, seductive figure with a human torso and the tail of a serpent, often with fish-like or aquatic features that link her to both the depths of the ocean and the otherworldly realms. Her beauty, however, is not her most intriguing aspect. It is her role as a goddess who governs both life and death that places her firmly within the complex spiritual cosmologies of Africa. In African traditions, Mami Wata's role transcends just the living world. She's deeply associated with the afterlife, representing the fluidity between life, death, and rebirth. For the people who revere her, Mami Wata embodies both the nourishing and the destructive aspects of water. Water is vital to life, but it can also drown and overwhelm. Just as she guides those who seek healing, she can also guide souls into the next realm, ensuring their safe passage through the underworld. Mami Wata's power over life and death is reflected in her ability to both nurture and destroy. She can bring fertility to barren lands and healing to the sick, but she can also punish those who displease her. Her power over death is not about sending souls to a final resting place. Rather, it is about guiding them through a transformative process. This aligns her with African views of the afterlife, which often see death as a transition, a step in the continuous cycle of existence rather than an end. In this sense, Mami Wata isn't just a goddess of death. She's a goddess of spiritual renewal and transformation, one who helps souls through their passage from life to the afterlife, where they can be reborn into a new existence. This duality is central to her nature. She is both a guardian and a guide, wielding power over the physical and spiritual worlds alike. The complexity of Mami Wata's character shows us that death is not merely an end, but a process of transition and metamorphosis. Her role in African spirituality isn't about punishment or fear. It is about understanding that death is necessary for the regeneration of life, a part of an ongoing cyclical journey. This duality of life and death is a key theme in many African myths and is reflected in the figures of other underworld deities who govern the transformative forces of the afterlife. Egbesu, often described as the darker twin of Mami Wata, is a powerful and enigmatic goddess associated with vengeance, cosmic justice, and the underworld. While Mami Wata represents the softer, nurturing side of death and transformation, Egbesu's power is rooted in destruction, balance, and retribution. Her role in the African spiritual pantheon is complex. She isn't just a deity of death, but one who ensures the equilibrium between life and death is maintained. Egbesu's origins can be traced to various African cultures, including those of the Ijaw people of Nigeria, where she is revered as the protector of the weak and the avenger of injustices. She is often depicted as a fierce, warrior-like figure whose very presence commands respect and fear. Her association with the underworld connects her to the realm of spirits, death, and the afterlife, but she is also seen as a deity who ensures that balance is restored when chaos or injustice has disrupted the natural order. Unlike other death deities who might passively rule over the afterlife, Egbesu actively intervenes in the world of the living. She is often called upon in times of war or strife, where her intervention can tip the scales toward justice. Her followers believe that Egbesu can bring swift and decisive retribution to those who cause harm or injustice, but she also restores order by guiding souls through the tumultuous realms of the afterlife. Egbesu's association with death is not about an irreversible finality. Rather, it is part of the cyclical nature of existence. In this way, she shares similarities with Mami Wata, who also governs the process of transition between life and death. However, Egbesu's focus is more on the transformative nature of death, ensuring that balance is restored and that the forces of destruction are properly channeled. Her power is often seen as necessary to keep the universe in harmony. Too much chaos, and the natural order would collapse, but too much stagnation would stifle growth and transformation. Her worship involves rituals and sacrifices aimed at appeasing her wrath and invoking her protective powers. Egbesu is not a deity who is easily angered, but when she is, her destructive force can have a profound impact on the world. The acts of retribution that she carries out are meant to purify the world of those who upset its delicate balance, ensuring that the forces of justice prevail and that the cycle of life and death continues unabated. In African cosmology, Egbesu represents the vital force that ensures the underworld is a place of change and rebirth. Her role in the spiritual realm is not just about sending souls to their final resting place, but about guiding them through the trials and tribulations that ultimately lead to transformation. She is the embodiment of spiritual justice, and her reign over the underworld reflects the belief that death is not a punishment, but a necessary process for the restoration of cosmic balance. The concept of the African underworld is vastly different from the more familiar Western notion of a place of eternal punishment or suffering. In African cosmology, the underworld is often viewed as a sacred space, a realm where souls transition and undergo transformation. It is not seen as a final destination of doom, but rather as a stage in a larger spiritual journey. The underworld in African belief systems is deeply connected to ancestors, the spiritual world, and the cycles of nature. It is a place where souls are nurtured, guided, and eventually reborn. In many African cultures, the underworld is not a dark, hellish abyss, but a place of rest, reflection, and preparation for reincarnation. The spiritual realm is often portrayed as a layered dimension, with the physical world above and the underworld below. The underworld is not a place of eternal suffering, but rather a realm where souls rest, reflect, and await their next cycle of existence. Death, therefore, is not the end, but a necessary step in the journey of spiritual evolution. The role of the underworld is central to many African spiritual practices. In many traditions, the living and the dead are believed to be in constant communication, with the deceased acting as intermediaries between the living and the divine. Ancestors are honored, and their guidance is sought in the realm of the living. The underworld is not something to fear, but a sacred space where the dead continue to play a vital role in the community's spiritual life. Furthermore, the underworld is often viewed as a place where the balance between life and death is maintained. It is the domain of gods and spirits who regulate the forces of nature, ensuring that the cycles of life continue. This idea of balance is critical in African spirituality, where life, death, and rebirth are seen as interconnected and cyclical. The underworld serves as the stage for this ongoing process, where souls undergo purification and transition, preparing for their return to the world of the living. In many African belief systems, the underworld is not a place of torment, but one of renewal and transformation. It is a place where the soul can shed its earthly burdens, reflect on past lives, and prepare for the next phase of existence. Death is seen as a natural part of the cosmic order, a necessary process for spiritual growth and development. The gods and spirits of the underworld, including deities like Mami Wata and Egbesu, are responsible for guiding souls through this transformation, helping them navigate the challenges of the afterlife and ensuring that they are ready for their next life. Thus, in African cosmology, the underworld is not a place to be feared, but a sacred space where the soul undergoes vital processes of purification, transformation, and rebirth. It is a space where the cycle of life continues, ensuring that the forces of nature and the spiritual world remain in balance. Death, in this context, is not an end, but a necessary part of the ongoing cycle of existence. In African spirituality, death is often seen as part of a cyclical process, one that is inextricably linked to rebirth and spiritual renewal. While many Western traditions emphasize death as an end, African cosmologies often view it as a transition passage from one phase of existence to another. This perspective is rooted in the belief that the soul is eternal and that death is merely one step in an ongoing journey. The idea of death as transformation is central to African cosmology. Death is not feared but accepted as part of the natural order. In fact, many African traditions see death as a vital part of life, providing the opportunity for spiritual growth, evolution, and the continuation of life through reincarnation. The ancestors, those who have passed, are seen as guardians and guides for the living, helping to maintain harmony in the world. African death deities, like Mami Wata and Egbesu, are deeply connected to the concepts of spiritual transformation and rebirth. They embody the forces that govern the passage between life and death, and their role is not just to manage the afterlife, but to ensure that the cycle of life continues. These deities are seen as protectors, guides, and agents of change, helping souls navigate the transition from the physical world to the spiritual realm and back again. In many African cultures, death is viewed as a process rather than a singular event. This process is seen as one of purification, where the soul is cleansed of its earthly attachments and prepared for its next stage of existence. Ancestors are revered for their wisdom and their ability to guide the living through life's challenges. This belief in the cyclical nature of existence helps to foster a deep sense of respect for both the living and the dead, creating a continuous spiritual connection between the two. Rituals surrounding death and burial are an essential part of these beliefs. In many African traditions, elaborate ceremonies are held to honor the dead and ensure that their souls successfully transition to the next realm. These rituals often involve music, dance, offerings, and prayers to the gods and ancestors, acknowledging the important role they play in the process of transformation and rebirth. Death, in this sense, becomes a celebration of the soul's journey rather than a sorrowful occasion. Furthermore, the idea of death and rebirth is not limited to human beings alone. In African spiritual systems, the natural world, plants, animals, and the elements also undergoes cycles of death and regeneration. The changing of seasons, the growth and decay of plants, and the life cycles of animals are all seen as part of a larger cosmic cycle of death and rebirth. This interconnectedness of life and death is central to African spiritual beliefs and helps to explain the reverence for nature and the elements. As we continue to explore the rich tapestry of African cosmology, it becomes clear that the concepts of death and rebirth are not merely philosophical ideas, but deeply ingrained aspects of everyday life. Death is not an isolated event, but a part of the ongoing cycle of existence. African death deities such as Mami Wata and Egbesu are powerful symbols of this eternal cycle, representing the transformation that takes place in the underworld and guiding souls through their journey to rebirth. When we think of underworld deities, we often think of figures who represent death as an inevitable and feared outcome. However, in African cosmologies, figures like Egbesu and Mami Wata represent more than just the finality of death. They are involved in the entire process of transition, transformation, and the restoration of cosmic balance. Unlike Hades in Greek mythology, who is more of a passive ruler over the dead, African underworld deities often have an active role in ensuring that the cycle of life and death flows harmoniously. This brings us to the comparison of African death goddesses with those from other cultures, such as Ereshkigal, Hell, and Hades. These figures, while sharing some common traits, also differ in important ways from their African counterparts. In Greek mythology, Hades is portrayed as a distant ruler of the underworld, a god who governs the dead but is not directly concerned with life's processes. Similarly, in Norse mythology, Hel reigns over the realm of the dead, yet her focus is more on the land of the departed and the management of the dead, rather than on any kind of spiritual renewal or balance. In contrast, African deities like Mami Wata and Egbesu are far more integrated into the spiritual processes of the living. They represent the ongoing cycle of life and death and are not separate from the living world. These deities do not merely rule over death. They help shape the spiritual and physical worlds, ensuring that life continues in a balanced and cyclical manner. Death in African cosmology is not something to be feared or avoided, but rather a transformative force that plays a necessary role in the ongoing existence of the universe. For instance, while Ereshkigal, Hell, and Hades might be seen as the final arbiters of the dead, Mami Wata and Egbesu both play roles in actively shaping the transitions between life, death, and rebirth. They are seen as guides, helpers, and agents of balance, ensuring that the forces of life and death work in tandem to sustain the natural order. Their influence stretches beyond death into the realms of fertility, justice, and the very forces that maintain the cosmos. In the Yoruba tradition, for example, death is not an end, but a transition. The underworld deity Oya, known as the goddess of winds and storms, is also linked to the forces of transformation and renewal. Her influence is not limited to the dead, as she also plays a crucial role in the lives of the living. Oya's power over both the forces of life and death is a reflection of the interconnectedness of all things, where death feeds into the cycle of life, and life itself is a constant state of change and evolution. This theme of interconnectedness is also reflected in the worship practices surrounding African death deities. Unlike the often solitary and somber rituals associated with death in Western cultures, African spiritual practices are deeply communal. They are a celebration of the ongoing cycle of existence, with ceremonies and rituals that honor both the dead and the living. These rituals often involve music, dance, and prayer, all of which serve to connect the spiritual world with the physical world and maintain the balance of life, death, and rebirth. In African belief systems, the gods and goddesses of death are not just rulers of an afterlife realm. They are active participants in the ongoing process of life itself. They guide souls through the transformative process of death, but they also help maintain the spiritual health and balance of the living world. This view of death as part of a greater cosmic order aligns with the African understanding of life as a continuous cyclione that is governed by spiritual forces, including those embodied by powerful deities like Egbesu and Mami Wata. In the Congo region of Central Africa, the spiritual traditions and beliefs around death and the afterlife are equally profound, yet often overlooked in global discussions about African cosmology. While Mami Wata and Egbesu have become prominent figures in African mythology, the Congo's spiritual beliefs offer a different, equally important perspective on the underworld and the forces that govern life and death. In Congo cosmology, the underworld is not only a place of transition, but also a realm of ancestors and spirits who play an active role in guiding the living. Death is not seen as an end, but a return to the spirit world, where the deceased continue to watch over and influence the living. The beliefs surrounding death in Congo culture reflect a deep reverence for ancestors and the roles they play in maintaining balance between the worlds of the living and the dead. One of the most significant aspects of Congo's spirituality is the concept of Bantu spirituality, which holds that the living and the dead are continuously in communication. In many Congo traditions, ancestors are not only honored through ritual and offerings, but their guidance is actively sought to ensure the well-being of the living. This creates a continuous connection between the two realms. Life and death are intertwined in a never-ending cycle. While specific death deities may vary among Congo cultures, one constant theme is the importance of the underworld as a place where souls go to rest, reflect, and await reincarnation. This realm is often seen as a purifying space where the soul is cleansed of earthly attachments and prepared for its next life. The spirits of ancestors, many of whom are believed to inhabit the underworld, are seen as protectors and guides for those still living on earth. In Congo spirituality, death is also connected to the idea of nature spirits, beings that govern the natural world and help maintain balance in the universe. These spirits are believed to have the power to guide souls through the afterlife, ensuring that they make a successful transition into the spiritual realm. These nature spirits, often embodied by animals, trees, or other natural elements, are thought to work alongside ancestors to help maintain cosmic balance. Another important aspect of Congo's view of death is the concept of the soul's journey. Death is not a permanent state, but a passage, and the soul's journey is one of purification and eventual return to the physical world through reincarnation. The connection between death and rebirth is seen as a cyclical process, with death acting as a necessary purification that allows the soul to enter a new existence. Rituals surrounding death in Congo culture are complex and deeply spiritual. They often involve elaborate ceremonies designed to honor the dead and help guide them through the afterlife. These rituals may include offerings of food, drink, and other items, as well as the invocation of ancestor spirits to ensure that the soul is properly guided. The ceremonies may also include music, dance, and drumming, all of which serve to connect the physical and spiritual worlds. While the Congo has its own distinct spiritual practices surrounding death, the themes of transformation, rebirth, and the cyclical nature of existence are common to many African traditions. The underworld is not simply a realm of death, but a space for spiritual growth and renewal. Through the guidance of ancestors and spirits, the soul is able to pass through the underworld and return to the living world, ready to begin a new chapter in its journey. In Yoruba cosmology, death and the afterlife are integral components of the spiritual landscape, with powerful deities overseeing the process of transformation. While many are familiar with the Yoruba pantheon of gods and goddesses such as Shango and Oshun, there are other deities whose role in death and rebirth is vital to the understanding of life itself. Among these is Oya, the goddess of winds, storms, and transformation. She is often depicted as a powerful, tempestuous figure who not only governs the forces of nature but also plays an essential role in death and spiritual renewal. Oya's role in Yoruba spirituality goes beyond her control over storms and winds. She's a goddess of change, destruction, and transformation, and she embodies the necessary forces of destruction that pave the way for new life. Her power is not limited to the physical world, but extends into the spiritual realm, where she helps guide souls through the transition of death and into the afterlife. Oya is believed to govern the realm of the dead, but not in the sense of a passive overseer. She is an active force in the lives of the living, helping them navigate the challenges of death and rebirth. Her influence on the afterlife is one of cleansing and renewal. Oya's storms are seen as purifying forces, sweeping away the old to make way for the new. In the Yoruba worldview, death is not the end of existence, but rather a process of spiritual purification. Oya's role is to ensure that the soul undergoes the necessary transformation before it can be reborn into a new life. Her storms are symbolic of the soul's journey through the afterlife, where it must pass through trials and tribulations before it can be cleansed and prepared for its next incarnation. In addition to Oya, Oshun, the goddess of rivers and love, also plays an important role in death and rebirth within the Yoruba pantheon. While Oshun is most commonly associated with love, fertility, and beauty, she also represents the regenerative forces of the earth. Oshun is connected to water, which is seen as a life-giving force, but she is also a goddess of transformation. In the Yoruba understanding, death is not a permanent state, but a temporary transition that eventually leads to a new life. Oshun's influence helps ensure that the soul is nurtured and guided through this process, offering protection and care during its journey through death and into a new cycle of life. The belief in reincarnation is central to the Yoruba understanding of death. Death is not seen as the final chapter of one's existence, but a transition into another form of life. The souls of ancestors are believed to be reincarnated in new bodies, continuing their journey and maintaining a strong connection between the spiritual world and the physical world. This cyclical view of life and death is echoed in the roles of Oya, Oshun, and other Yoruba deities, who are actively involved in ensuring that the soul's journey is one of spiritual growth and transformation. In Yoruba traditions, death is often seen as a natural and necessary part of existence, a process of spiritual evolution rather than an end. The deities of death and rebirth, including Oya and Oshun, are not figures of fear or punishment, but are seen as guides and protectors who help the soul through its transition. Their roles are integral to the belief in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth that defines the Yoruba understanding of the universe. As we've explored throughout this journey into African spirituality, it's clear that the gods and goddesses of death and the underworld play a deeply transformative role in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The figures of Mami Wata, Egbesu, Oya, Oshun, and others reveal a profound understanding of death not as an end, but as a natural transition and a crucial part of spiritual growth. Mami Wata, often seen as a nurturing goddess of water and healing, also carries with her the power of transformation, guiding souls through the underworld and into new spiritual lives. A darker twin, Egbesu, brings balance to the cycle, ensuring that cosmic justice is served and that destruction leads to rebirth. Both deities represent the duality of life and death, showing that death isn't just about endings, but about change, cleansing, and renewal. The Yoruba, Congo, and other African belief systems also emphasize the cyclical nature of existence, where the underworld is not a realm of eternal suffering, but a place of rest, purification, and eventual return. The spirits of ancestors remain active participants in the spiritual lives of the living, guiding them through life's challenges and helping them understand the mysteries of death. In these systems, the dead are not separate from the living. They continue to influence the world, offering wisdom and protection. By exploring these lesser-known African goddesses of the underworld, we've uncovered a deeper understanding of life, death, and the eternal process of transformation. These deities show us that death is not something to fear, but a natural part of a continuous, interconnected cycle that shapes our world. Their influence reaches far beyond the realm of the dead, ensuring that the forces of life, death, and rebirth remain in balance. So, what lessons can we take away from these forgotten goddesses and their roles in African cosmology? First, we learn that death, transformation, and renewal are not separate from life. They are intrinsic parts of our existence. We learn that the journey through death is a passage, not an end, and that the underworld is a space of spiritual growth, not eternal punishment. Lastly, we learn that these goddesses, through their active roles in both life and death, remind us of the importance of balance between destruction and creation, endings and beginnings. As we continue to explore the rich spiritual traditions of Africa, let us remember that these goddesses of the underworld are not forgotten. They are still present in the rituals, beliefs, and cultures of many African communities. Their stories, though often overlooked, offer us a deeper understanding of life, death, and the mysteries of existence. By embracing their teachings, we can gain insight into the eternal cycle that shapes our world and perhaps find a new way to view death and rebirth in our own lives. If you enjoyed learning about these forgotten African goddesses of the underworld, please like this video, share it with others who might find it interesting, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content on forgotten myths and spiritual traditions from around the world.